This is the Authentic Change Podcast, and I am Mike Horn. Authenticity reflects what we want from each other and our organizations. Open communication, trust, community, fun, and opportunity. I want to help you to do your best in your personal and professional relationships. This podcast delivers expertise, insights, and approaches on authentic leadership. To live your purpose, to lead from your values, to establish connected relationships, to steward people and culture change, to build and sustain prosperity, and to open doors and possibilities. This podcast will assist you in paving the way forward to personal, team, and organizational prosperity. Welcome to another episode of Authentic Change with Mike Horn. I am absolutely delighted today to have an opportunity to interview, to discuss with an expert on happiness and fun and joy at work. And I'm really looking forward to digging in to those topics with Dr. Catherine Auler. And as I've prepared for today's discussion and thinking about everyone in the audience, I think that Catherine's work, Dr. Catherine Auler's work, will help us to answer some questions around, have I made the right decision, particularly about career and employment. And I think there's an underlying theme that I'm not sure is true at all, but I'd like to explore with her is, we achieve what we believe. So this is a great delight for me today and to introduce Dr. Catherine Auler, workplace wellness researcher, expert, author, and positive psychology coach. She can help us be happier in any job. So, Catherine, again, welcome. Can you say a few words about yourself?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you, Mike, for having me today. It's lovely to be here talking about my favorite topic with you. I'm looking forward to our discussion. Just a little bit about me. I've always been hoping to have a really great time at work, even when I was a girl at school, at high school, and then later on at university, college. I was working hard, a good student, because I imagined that it was all going to pay off in this amazing work-life existence. And I'm not sure quite where I got that idea, but I guess it was just all those good strokes from the adults in my world when I was doing the right things and studying and so forth. So when I finally finished my university, to be honest, there was a little bit of disillusionment going on, because it wasn't that life was awful, but it was life still. And I was in work, and it was sometimes good and it was sometimes not so good. Life is ups and downs. And so that really set me on a journey of thinking, well, what's going on here? I really want to have a good time at work. I want to have fun at work. How am I going to do that a little bit more? And I just really started exploring that, and I started doing research in that area. And been involved in that area for some time. And more recently, I've done training with groups of people, but more recently, one-on-one coaching with people and helping them on their journey.
Yes. And as I think about that background, one of the points of intersection for me is I taught in different universities, and particularly in the field of organization development, this, tiny little field that I know a lot about. What do they say? People who know a lot about a little bit of life. But I always thought that, along with many of my colleagues, that we weren't really ever preparing people for employment or for jobs. Rather, it was maybe a way to develop critical thinking, to explore the world. And I wonder, it sounds like you were well equipped to do that, to deliver that critical thinking to where you were at a moment or moments in time.
Yes, well, I suppose you're right there. It was certainly a skill that I developed. And one of the things about critical thinking, it can be a very, very useful tool. And because I think, like you, I did a PhD, so I did a lot of study and a lot of critical thinking. And you get very good at it and taking something and really sort of squeezing all the meaning out of it and asking all sorts of questions about a topic. But one thing I felt it left me with a little bit was, well, where is the joy? Because it's very much an analytical skill. So where is the joy? And I kind of just had the sense I just want to live life a bit. But as you say, probably what also was happening there is that I was utilizing some of those critical thinking skills to think about, well, how do we access joy? What is joy? How do we find it? What do we really want in work? What is it that we seek?
Is it an emotion? Is it a feeling? It is the question that, often I'm asked about, well, how do I think about integrity? And I'm sure the question for you is, how do you think about joy? How do you describe it?
Yeah, and it's a good question. And I've called myself the happiness at work coach. And so I'm using the word happiness. And I think I do that because it resonates. Most people understand on some level what happiness is. It's a positive emotion. It's something we kind of like. But really, there's many layers, aren't there, to happiness and especially joy. And joy is quite a complex thing, really. And I think joy and challenge and difficulty can kind of coexist in a way that perhaps when we think of happiness, it's a little bit different. So, yeah, what is it? Is it emotion? What is it? Very good question. I did some market research actually earlier in the year as part of my business and asking people who are unhappy at work, what was going on? Why were you unhappy? What do you want instead? And so in terms of unhappiness, we know we've all been there. We know there can be leadership challenges. It can be workload, overload. It can be colleagues not pulling their weight. It can be a whole range of things. And what people want often are those resolved. But when I really dug a little bit deeper in terms of why do you want, good relationships with your colleagues? Why do you want a reasonable workload? Why do you want work-life balance? It really came down to two things in a way. It's quite simple, was joy and also purpose, that sense of meaning. And I think those are two very connected. The joy and the meaning that we seek. And there's something there, I think, very much around authenticity, which I know is your...
sure. And just to make that connection appear in front of us, when authentic behavior occurs, or I'm authentic when my words and actions match. And even better when my thoughts, words, and actions match, that I have this alignment. And what we know, and from the happiness research, is that that creates congruency. When my attitudes, behaviors, and cognitions are in alignment, that creates happiness. And to your point, I don't mean the kind of happiness that comes with a new boyfriend or girlfriend or the birth of a child or, some sort of holding on or letting go. Rather, I think about that's the sort of sustained happiness because that's created by this congruency. And what we also know from the happiness research is that we enjoy being around happy people. And as a result of that, we can build foundations of trust. We can build better and more effective communication in pairs and trios, all at the heart of innovation in human enterprise. So that's what really it excites me about it. And I think there's a lot of what would the Gestalt psychologists call it? Not synchronicity there.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting. There's so much in what you've said. You talk about communication and being with positive people, and that emotions are, I guess, contagious to some extent. And one of the pieces of research that I did, which is a foundation of how I approach my work now, was with a group of people who had claimed to have had fun in every job that they have ever had. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
really fascinated to talk to these people. They range from people in their 30s to people in their 60s. So there's a wealth of experience, work experience and life work experience. And so really interested in one of the things that you mentioned being around positive people. And that was one thing that came out actually, just some of the choices that people would make around connecting with others in the workplace. It wasn't that collegial relationships, they recognise the real importance of those and to do those well where possible, but at times to really to perhaps connect more with people who they felt could just be positive, and less so with the moaners and the groaners.
Right.
We all need that, but yeah, yeah, that's right. And so yeah, that was something. But that connection, I think, was certainly provided a sense of joy. The connection with others.
Part of your public story is you had reached some level of unhappiness in your dream job. And as you left, I don't know under what circumstances, I assume you voluntarily resigned, you quit.
Yes.
You pulled the plug, you were a pioneer before the Great Resignation, at least as it's described in the U.S. as taking place, or the Big Quit.
Yes.
And I'm intrigued by one of the questions that you explored in the, I don't want to call it the aftermath of that employment decision, but post that decision. You had the question that you explored is, have I made the right decision? So yes. Is there a summative conclusion? What guidance do you have?
Well, yes. And it was because the job that we're talking about was my dream job. When I was given it, I was like, I was scared someone was going to come along and pinch me and tell me, this is a dream. It was like, it was so wonderful. It was a lovely team doing all the things I love to do, very purposeful, and it was wonderful. And I felt I was being paid well for that. So, wow. But yeah, over time, things did change somewhat. There was a little bit of boredom that set in, but the biggest thing were restructures that changed my scenario quite a lot. And so I went from feeling this is the dream job to actually one day realizing I was miserable. I was just miserable, and I was miserable for a while, and I just didn't know what to do about it. Tried to do a few things, looked around for some guidance, but just couldn't find that. And really, I guess I wanted that feeling of misery to stop. So ultimately I made this decision, and a few months before I left, obviously I felt a lot better because I was going to finish this misery. And once I finished, felt better because it wasn't there anymore. But I had always remained a bit haunted by that, because part of me was looking at that time when I was in that job for a way, is there a way I can turn this job around again? Because it was the job I really had chosen. And so I kind of in some ways had intuitive sense that there probably was something I could do, but I just didn't feel like I had those tools. And so it was really retrospectively, I wanted to examine that because it also had implications for my career. And having left that job, it wasn't an easy job, career path to get back into. So that was part of the research that I did, exploring. And I can talk to you about what I found.
What contributed to the misery? Was it the reward system? Was it the relationship system? Was it leadership? Was it purpose, mission, values, alignment? Was it structure? I heard what you described in terms of the reorgs and shrinks and restructures and all of the perils of organizational life. But for you, what contributed to the misery?
Yeah, good question. So I think it was gradual over time. And I think that's what happens to us. These little things happen and we make changes, we make compromises, and we don't necessarily think too much about it because we either kind of just put up and just grit our teeth and kind of keep going, like being hard workers we are. And also if we see ourselves as positive people too, we think, well, we'll just sort of think about this, we'll just smile and, keep going. So I think I did both of those things, trying to be positive, but also kind of gritting my teeth and just hoping somehow things were changing. So I think this is what happens often. And I guess my experience is not unique. The sense of, actually, I'm feeling a bit miserable here. But how did I get there? And I think there were a series of little things in a way that contributed and added up. And we're talking about authenticity and aligning our thoughts, our actions with what we believe to hold to be true, hold to be important. And I think a lot of that's what happens. When I started my job, it aligned perfectly. I felt great. But then these little changes and these little compromises, and I think really looking back, and I think I just lacked a lot of experience. Looking back, it would have been about actually stopping and pausing at those moments and thinking about what are my priorities here? What do I want? And it's a constant tweaking process, really. Joy, happiness, constantly tweaking. We think we've arrived there when we've got the perfect job, but then there's changes. So we have to keep constantly tweaking.
Yes. There isn't a perfect job, I don't think. Maybe.
Or for a while, perhaps.
But you research people who describe more or less perfect jobs, all right?
Well, that was what was really interesting about them, because in some ways they all pretty much always had fun at any job they had.
They had fun at it, yeah.
Yeah, but they nevertheless saw themselves as unique in terms of their colleagues. So generally, they had fairly good education choices, and when I was talking to them in pretty good workplaces, unless they were working for themselves. So they had good conditions generally. However, they recognised they were also unique as against colleagues who might have the same scenario, but weren't particularly having fun and weren't particularly happy. So they saw themselves as being quite unique individuals in terms of that experience, because they could, they were used to people and their family, their friends, their colleagues being more disgruntled with work than they had ever been.
And what underlies that, do you think? Again, is it relationships? So much of the Gallup research, as you likely know, suggests that one of the keys to engagement is having a best friend at work. That if you believe that someone has your back at work, then you're likely to be engaged. And since 70% of engagement is within managerial control, it's something to think about in our world of work today, about relationships and how they get formed up and down and laterally.
Yes, interesting one. And I know that we do, relationships, friendships, very important. And I think people did talk about relationships as being an important part of their work. I didn't necessarily explore the issue of friendship in that way, but for me, I guess what came out of the research, and in some ways it's sort of a little bit coming at a different angle from the organisational research that I had done in the past, where I had explored what organisations can do to support workers have fun. I was interested in interviewing these people because they seem to have a sort of capacity to have fun despite the job and they had. And I met some of these people over my previous work and always wanted to interview them. They seem to be people who seem uniquely skilled in some way to be able to enjoy their circumstances, enjoy their job, to some extent despite the circumstances.
So what were some of their jobs, or are some of their jobs?
ranges. We had a team leader, an engineering workshop, cleaner, a CEO of a big company, IT people, academics.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so a range. And I think what really distinguished these people, once I dug, because I didn't really know how they always had fun, to be honest, when I talked to them. Once I dug a little bit, it did appear that they just it was a priority and they believed that they could. So if things weren't going so well, they would make changes. And I guess so they were always tweaking, perhaps even without knowing it, and possibly aligning, with their priorities, with their values, the circumstances, shifting, changing if they needed to, having a talk to management, so forth.
Well, it's so important to understand values and to have self-awareness. I think in every conversation around authentic leadership, which is built around creating trust, fun, open communication, or stewardship. And when those exist, it's because trust is in place. And maybe there is some truth to the idea that you can't trust everyone about everything. So important to align on, mission or values or purpose. And, maybe being able to foster values that are humanistic in nature, right? That find value and respect for every individual. You grow inclusion by having diverse ideas and diverse people around you, and work from that contextual framework.
Yes, I think definitely helpful, and I think one of the things that probably came out of my research was, how can you help people to support people to, in some ways, take responsibility themselves for a lot of their own happiness. And that's really to have that open door policy and to be able to be a leader who it's okay for people to come and talk to and to explore issues with. And, when you've got that and you say, that sense of trust, it's amazing what can be achieved.
Yes, one of the questions that I frequently ask is that, are you open and accessible, or open and approachable, or are you guarded and cautious? What's your sense of the leadership environment? I think many people don't, they express a range of opinion on that, on that topic.
Yes, and I guess because leaders are human, aren't they? And one of the things that when I'm working with individuals, be they leaders officially,
yes, this is what I wanted to understand. Yes.
Is one of the key things that we do discuss, and it's in terms of aligning with what our priorities, what our values are, is communication. And how do we communicate? So how do we communicate if we want to? If we're in a situation where we're talking to a manager, how would we communicate when we want to express our needs? But also, if you're in leadership, how do you communicate too? If you're wanting to instigate change or what have you. And I think it really comes back to stopping and thinking. And we all have moments. I had a moment yesterday. I took my father to the doctor, and I realized I was a bit strong. I was very protective of my dad, and in the end I came out and thought, Catherine, you didn't use those principles of, this is another person, this is another human being, because and how can we, they're another human being. They might not be responding exactly as I might expect them to or want them to, but what's going on? What's their backstory? And so, it's humbling, those sorts of situations, but it's something we always have to remind ourselves of. Practice those skills. We'll do it well sometimes, we'll muck up other times, but it's always coming back to, yes, for me, it's a priority, a value that I would treat people with respect. I would always be willing to listen and see their point of view. And so I have to come back to that. And I think that's it. Coming back to that not beating ourselves up if we get off track, because we will, but always coming back to that and exploring those communication, what is open communication? What does that mean? It's not always easy, but how do we do it, and how do we continue to try and do that?
Breathing is so important. And what I often consider is that those whom I encounter, I don't know what happened to them 5 minutes before we met. I don't know what's going to happen to them 10 minutes after we meet. I do know that I have this moment in time to be present and to be attentive and to foster.
I like that. Notion of breathing. Yes, just pausing and breathing. You're right. And when we're feeling some emotion, we tend not to, like if we're a little bit worked up.
Sure.
So
the stress takes over.
Yeah, that's right. So taking that deep breath and sitting back and just getting in that place of, I like that, Mike. Yeah.
And so how do we help teams with that, Catherine?
So you mean in terms of communicating as a team?
Finding this joy and purpose and happiness and
as leaders,
creating a pathway.
Right, yes. So, interesting. So from my point of view, I often work with individuals in groups who are parts of teams rather than teams. So they might be, so they'll be talking about issues, their teams and so forth, and other colleagues and so forth. So, how do we help teams with it? Well, I mean, I guess it's, encouraging. We talk about the alignment, say, with the organisation and so forth, and their values. And then also it's, I suppose in the work that I do, I encourage individuals, in identifying their own values and priorities. In that process, they're then, if it's not quite, they don't feel quite in alignment with the organisation, with the team and so forth, it's really about finding a way to marry the two that feels comfortable and feels real for that person. And I think there are often ways we can do that. It might involve, of course, having conversations if there are things that are going on that we don't necessarily agree with and so forth, and then finding some kind of way forward and compromise. But you're finding that between the personal values and priorities and the team, I think it's really important. And I think, if we can do that, and be open to that. And I guess that means that it's not just people having to align to the team's values, but it's the other way around as well. And as we've talked about, it's that open communication.
And what I wonder, Catherine, is how to live our purpose. To what extent do we really have to find that at work? And I think that, is changing in ways that we use talent. And, a lot of people are working in service-related jobs, and lower income. I mean, these are not purpose-filling jobs.
Yes. So it is an interesting one because, we hear there's a lot of sayings like, do what you love and you'll never work in your day life and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Do
what you love what you do.
All that sort of thing. Yeah. So, and I mean, I think it's more complicated than that. Because, we can also, it depends if we're thinking about our passion in life, that may or may not fall within work. But if it does fall within work, I mean, I'm doing my, living my passion, with the research and the coaching work I do. Is it always joyful? Is it always easy? Not necessarily. I love the coaching, but there's other parts of running a business. So learning about marketing, that's pretty challenging for me. It's not my sweet spot, So even if we, following our passion per se, it's not always easy. And as sometimes people do have passions outside work, fall outside work. In terms of purpose, I do think purpose is important for all people in work to a greater or lesser extent. But I think what I tend to talk to people about is less probably about their passion, but what the kinds of things they love to do, the kinds of tasks really they love to do. And we might often find that over our career, even if we've been in a number of different jobs and roles, we might have enjoyed similar kinds of tasks. So, for example, for myself, I enjoy mentoring, I enjoy facilitation, I enjoy research. I've done those in lots of different ways. I've been a music teacher, I've been a social worker, I've been a help students. And so I think it's, if we can think about the kinds of things that we actually give us that real sense of, a kind of sweet spot activities that we enjoy, sometimes that can be more useful, because even if it's in a job that there's perhaps not a lot of scope, not a lot of autonomy, there may be ways we can find to do some of those more. And that can lead to sort of that greater sense of joy and purpose, I've found.
I work with the idea of how do we create blessings? How do we express our gratitude? Because with gratitude comes abundance. So it's really a way of thinking about creating blessings for others, blessing others. It's a way of, in my older white male skin, to think no longer about, warmth and affection and positive interpersonal relationships at work, but rather to think about the emotions of love and joy, and those in which your work and research takes you through to happiness.
Yeah, that's a lovely idea. And I think, as I said earlier, in the research that I've done, in a lot of ways, it boiled down to people want a sense of purpose, and a lot of that was about what they can contribute. The meaning they get in work is what they can contribute to others or to a project, and in a sense, how are they therefore blessing others? In terms of making a contribution to the world. And really, that's something that all of us get so much. It's better to bless than receive, isn't it? So that's because it actually feels better. I mean, we like to get gifts and that, but you know what I mean. Yeah, you're right. So it's that sense of purpose and meaning is crucial. So being able to make a contribution, and bless others.
Having mediated lots of disputes, whether as a volunteer mediator in the District of Columbia's multi-door open door dispute resolution program, as an executive, as a organization development or people and culture leader, I think that it's easiest always to criticize. She's not enough of this, he's not enough of that, he's too much of this, she's too much of that, they do too much of this, and rather difficult for all of us, or for many, to think about how we optimize efficiency, right? Because as long as we're working just on improving others' perceived efficiencies, we're just working on, health. And when we work on the positive, we aim towards growth and wellness, I think.
I think that's really interesting. And I think that's where what we're talking about being authentic, can demand a lot of courage, because it really can take looking at ourselves, so rather than others. And I think when we're not very happy at work, found for myself and others, we tend to point fingers at maybe not so much other people, but the situation, management, whatever it might be. And sure, it doesn't mean that things are perfect, but if we don't always have too much control over the external, but we do have some control over how we respond. And so we can lovingly talk to people and if we need to, about our needs and so forth. However, sometimes, it's about, I think something I've learned is about looking at myself. Where are my values? Where do they sit? And can I be courageous enough to try and change the circumstances that I do have control over to align with values, rather than, maybe just leaving the situation and throwing my hands up. How can I stay in the situation? How can I make a contribution here?
And I think there is research, or, one time when I worked for a version of Towers Watson, I thought there was a stream of research that suggested the more tenured one was with an organization, actually the better the economic outcomes were in the long run. There's no there's less loyalty. I mean, certainly in organizations, but this was in a period of mobility in employment, and said that people who moved around as much probably didn't earn as much over the long haul. But I wonder if that still holds true, what that means. How has your work influenced or affected or impacted by the global COVID pandemic?
Yes, well, it is interesting. We're hearing I think you mentioned earlier the Great Resignation and this what we're hearing in the media about people leaving their jobs, and a lot of it I think is around searching for purpose and meaning. I think what we're talking about today is very relevant because a lot of people have been through a tough time, or they see other opportunities, or it's ready to make a change. And it's not to say don't do that, but I think it can be really useful. And I always say to people, if you're thinking about change, let's make it proactive if possible rather than reactive. And I talked about my situation of kind of wanting to escape my misery, and ended up being kind of reactive decision that I always wondered if it was the right one. And so if we can have a think about, okay, well, what's not so good here in my job? What is it that's making me think maybe I should leave? And what do I want? And are there ways I can have that here? Are there ways I can turn that around? At the very least, to live my priorities, my values while I'm in this organisation, and contribute as much as I can to the situation while I'm here. And so that's and then if we make a decision to leave, we're doing so in sort of a more grounded kind of place, and more centered in who we are and what we believe in, our own integrity. I think if I'm able to say that, I mean, I know that's it's not an easy thing to do, but that's what probably some.
Well, that is that is, I think, we begin to summarize and link this back to integrity. Thinking about my recent book release, Integrity by Design: Working and Living Authentically. I'm often also asked to describe integrity, and when we think about integrity, we think about the whole cloth. We think that it hangs together elegantly. That it is the genuine article. And this expression that you took in the insights that you gain and the perspectives you have to share come from that experience. And it's so wonderful that you're able to add this to the world and to learn with your clients and bring that. So what are some of the ways that, just thinking about our conversation today and the audience, the growing audience of the listeners for Authentic Change with Mike Horn, what are a few observations or insights or ideas or actions that you can leave with the audience today?
Yeah, sure. Well, I really would encourage people to have hope. In the research that I did, that was one of the things that came through. The people that are quite skilled at always sort of tweaking and making sure they have as much fun at work as they can, enjoy their work as much as they can, and very kind of hopeful, really. And I think, it's something I've been inspired by them is to, there's always something that can be done. So I think that if you're going through a tough time at work, and encountering challenges, there's always something we can do, even if it's something small, even if it's just go for a walk around the block, we're not feeling that great or whatever.
Reflecting,
yeah. So there's just to have hope and reflect, stop and reflect when things aren't going so well, and how can we tweak? What can we do here?
Wonderful. So great to be in conversation with you today, Dr. Catherine Auler. How would members of our audience get in touch with you?
Well, thanks, Mike. It's been great to have a chat. So my website, www.happinessatworkcoach.com.
Happinessatworkcoach.com.
Yeah. Perfect. And so take a look, and I have a free PDF on there. The 3 simple steps to enjoying any job. So welcome to download that, and love to hear from you if you want to drop me a line.
I look forward to reading 3 Steps to Loving Any Job. Did I get the title right?
3 simple steps to enjoying any job. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, great. Super. And to be in touch with you once again at happinessatworkcoach.com.
Happinessatworkcoach.com.
Happinessatworkcoach.com. Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Catherine Auler. And for everyone in today's listening audience, please share the episode with your colleagues and friends. Please like the episode. And I look forward to additional episodes of Authentic Change with Mike Horn. Stay well. Thanks for listening. And I hope you'll subscribe today and tell a friend about our show. If you're looking for hands-on help to increase your success through authentic change, or have a question you'd like to hear me answer here, please email me at mike@mike-horn.com.